Hi everyone, I'm Tally, this is Farrell, and we are bored of it. And welcome to our review of Harrow County, the follow-up game from the publisher of Mind Management. Do you remember that critical, darling? Harrow County, also based on a comic book series, is for 1 to 3 players in the base game. It can be 1 to 4 players with the Fairfolk expansion, but it is mainly designed as a 2-player head-to-head game.
So, in this game, you're generally going to be taking on opposing factions. So Tally might be the family who want to destroy the town. I might be the protectors who, unsurprisingly, want to protect the town. Or we could even be Kammi who wants to find a doll. Harrow County is played over a number of chapters, and chapters 1 to 3 consist of what you could say is the core game, where you will have the family fight against the protectors in an attempt to either destroy or save the town. And each chapter will progressively add more mechanisms, making the game more robust and complex. Chapter 4 will see you swap out one of those 2 factions for a completely new faction, Kammi. And Chapter 5 will give you the rules to play a 3-player game using yet another new faction, Hester the Witch, who can be used in combination with any of the other 3, but obviously only 2 of them.
A player gaining 7 points will trigger the end of the game, with the player with the most points at the end of that round being crowned the winner. Both players can score by controlling the middle hex at the end of each round, or per enemy unit that's removed during combat. But beyond that, both factions will score differently. The family is trying to destroy the town by creating a chain of storms from their home hex to these houses, with each house getting destroyed being worth 2 points. The protectors are trying to shepherd the townsfolk to their home hex, with each one rescued also being worth 2 points.
This is usually done through the 3 core actions of Harrow County: Advance, Spawn, and Strengthen. Advance is a simple move. Spawn lets you spawn haints on the board, which are little units that will help you block up the map and you can use in combat. And Strengthen will allow you to add cubes to the battleground, and when somebody attacks someone else, you're going to take up all the cubes in the battleground, throw them into the dice tower, that is the box for Harrow County, and see what happens. Now, generally on a turn, what you're going to do is back and forth, you're going to flip a mason jar, which gives you a mason jar action. And these do different things. So some will allow you just to attack your opponent. Others will allow you to take those core actions I just mentioned in a variety of different ways, depending on the faction or which mason jar you activate. And you'll also have a mason jar that lets you activate your legend ability, because each faction has a legend ability, which will in some way interact with their overall goal in the game. So the family will get to put storms out, the protectors will get to move the townsfolk, and this will also allow you to use your character's special power, because each character in the game has their own unique special power.
Harrow County is semi-asymmetrical and quite variable. In later chapters of the game, you'll be able to pick which character out of your faction you would like to play as, with each one having a unique ability, as well as which faction legendary ability you would like to use, with each faction having a choice of 2. On top of that, you can also build up your abilities, because each faction starts off fairly weak, but you're able to upgrade your core abilities by gathering up the tokens that are on the main board.
We can start by talking about the best parts of Harrow County, which is the balance of simplicity versus tactical options available to players. Because the actions you're going to do 90% of the time, your advance, your spawn, your strengthen, are really straightforward, but the sandbox you're given to go about your goals is quite vast. And you're going to have to ask yourself how you want to play it, basically, because do you want to rush your objective and go straight for it? Or do you want to take it slow, gather upgrade tokens, build up your power, and then unleash? Do you want to play defensively by spawning a lot of haints and blocking your opponent from moving? Or do you just want to go all-out attack and wipe them from the board?
That's not to say it's a simple game, as we definitely messed up some of the rules in our first few plays, plus the complexity increases with each chapter, but it's the type of game where the complexity comes from the options available to you rather than the actions themselves.
Arguably though, the more complex Harrow County gets, the better it gets. Chapter 2 is going to add in powerful upgrade tiles specifically for the family and one-time use action cards for the protectors. This really spices up gameplay because it makes the game a bit more asymmetric, it improves the decision space, and it also means that you never quite know what your opponent is capable of, adding a bit of drama to the proceedings. Chapter 3 then is going to layer on top of this bonus action tiles which go above the mason jar actions. And essentially, if you're the first to take a specific mason jar action in a round, you get the bonus. And this is a really interesting push-pull decision space because it then changes what actions you might want to go for when, because you might really want to make use of the bonus that's above that tile, or just to stop your opponent from getting that bonus. So, in our opinion, the best way to play is with all the rules, as it provides the deepest, most tactical, most engaging experience. That isn't going to be for everyone though, and really what's great is you can mix and match these different mechanisms to create the Harrow County you want to play, or just stick with chapter 1 and still have a great time. The variability in this game is immense, but there is also a depth that appears the more you understand the game.
This comes from the asymmetry, as both factions will play in different ways. As one example of this, when taking Mason Jar action X, the protectors will pick one of the core abilities and do it as many times as is allowed, whereas the family will draw action tiles out of a bag and use them to perform each individual action. The good news is that the asymmetry is the perfect amount of asymmetry, in that it's different enough so that it's interesting for both sides, but it's not so much that you don't understand what your opponent is trying to do without playing as the opposite faction. One thing to note is that as the chapters progress, things get more zany. At its core, it is quite a tactical game, and the more mechanisms, the more unpredictable it gets. In chapter 1, it's quite clean and tactical, but by chapter 3, special abilities are being thrown around. The protectors have special ability cards that the family can't predict. The family are pulling off all sorts of crazy upgraded actions, and cubes are flying unpredictably out of the tree. By chapter 3, it becomes more of an opportunistic efficiency puzzle than the head-to-head back and forth that you started with. We think this is great, but maybe others wouldn't like this. Overall though, it's a great tactical experience. I block you in here with my haints so you can't move, but then you strengthen and come out swinging. You place a storm in my path, so now it's harder for me to move, and as a result I change my tactics and take the middle space of the map for the VP, forcing you to change tactics. We love that it lets you feel clever, and winning feels hard fought and deserved.
Important thing to note is that although you do increase the complexity, it doesn't increase the playtime. And that's pretty great because Harrow County has one of the best playtimes of any game I've seen in terms of how it fits into what the game does. It's between 40 and 60 minutes on average, and it just fits so well with the wonderful arc this game has of you start out weak, you expand across the map, you gather upgrades, you get powerful, you battle your opponent, you rescue or destroy, bam, the game's over. It's such a roller coaster ride and so tightly tuned into that playtime that it makes for a wonderful cadence and rhythm to the game. And it's the type of game that once you get it out, you're going to be playing back-to-back games because of that. Probably the only thing we didn't really like about Harrow County is the player count, because it's quite strange that this is essentially for 80% of it a 2-player game. And then there's this optional way to play with 3 players, and a faction you can only play with 3 players. But the rulebook even says that you should only be playing that if you all very much understand the core concepts and your experience with Harrow County. And it's like a weird proposition to find 3 people who all intimately know a 2-player game up until that point. It's just something that I feel will trip people up when they look at the box and see 1 to 3 players on the shelf. They buy it, they take it home, and then realize that is a bit of a bust in that regard.
Finally, we just want to mention the production, which is absolutely stellar. The storage solutions are excellent. It's a matter of minutes before you're set up and ready to play, and the tokens are all a joy to play with. There's just some really sharp design and real thoughts to the player experience, such as the battleground being the lid for the upgrade tokens. There may be one thing that falls into gimmick territory, which is the tree, which is incorporated into the box and serves as a cube tower for battle. Don't get us wrong, it is quite fun to chuck the cubes down there, but what we've found is they tend to go spraying out all over the table rather than landing in the battleground, so it's not quite perfect.
Final thoughts. Harrow County was a game that we enjoyed tremendously. We played it something like 9 times within a week. It is tense, it's fun, it's robust. Just generally had a great time playing it. So can't recommend it enough if it sounds like your thing.
We do think that all of the options in the later chapters may overwhelm some. Plus it does turn the game into something that's maybe a bit more clean and tactical to something that's a bit more unhinged. But it's very much a game that you can play how you please. It's a full recommendation from us if you're looking for an interesting, novel, 2-player head-to-head experience. If you enjoyed this review, we'd really appreciate it if you could give us a thumbs up. Subscribe to our channel if you're not already. Please feel free to ask us any questions about the game down in the comments.
See ya.